This week, I'm just back from an awesome backpacking trip with my 4- and 5-year-old in Olympic National Park. Had to go ultralight. What made the cut? How did I carry it? How did I use it? Including capturing this star-stacked image at f4 with a 28mm, as well as some HDR captures. We'll go behind the scenes. I'll show you some images, talk about what went through my head as I was photographing them. And I'll also talk about how I use my Kase magnetic filters and why I think they're so awesome. Well, hey everyone, Hudson here. This week, we're gonna talk about going really light, backpacking with photo gear, you know, how to kind of make the decision about what to take with you, what not to take with you. I'm gonna talk a little bit more, answering some questions I've had about how and why I'm using these Kase magnetic filters and how awesome and easy they are to use. I'll talk about how I took those with me on this trip. We're also going to get into some star stacking. I'm more of a star tracker user, but when going ultralight, I didn't bring the tracker with me, and I experimented a little bit with sequitur and some star stacking, so we'll talk a little bit about that and some HDR capture stuff. I'll go through some images from the trip. It's going to be a pretty fun ATS this week. So, a couple quick announcements. I got my Brookings workshop, Southern Oregon Coast workshop, kicking off at the end of the month. I cannot wait. It's been so long since I've been out in the field with other photographers having fun and learning. We're going to have an office hours right before that next Tuesday. It's going to be 10 a.m. Pacific. Sign up at hudsonhenry.com/office hours. We've got office hours signups there all the time for these free meetings with other photographers about all things photographic. And this next one, we're going to talk about workshops. And I'd love to hear your positive and negative workshop experiences or impressions or preconceptions. And we'll talk about what I love so much about them and share some stories and experiences. But you can also bring questions about anything photographic that you want Rick, David, Woody, Darren, and I to discuss, and we'll take it on. So sign up at hudsonhenry.com/office hours. It's free. We can see your face on Zoom, or you can join us on YouTube on the live stream. You can leave your question and sign up at that website. I will be talking about a few pieces of gear here today. Links to all that gear are always at hudsonhenry.com/ATS links. And I've got links in this video's description. If you click the title or show more, you can always dig in and see the stuff that I'm talking about specifically in this video. But I keep that list updated at ATS links, that ATS links thing on my website. That's updated all the time with the latest gear that I'm using. All right, that's about it for announcements. Oh, you know, there's always a chaptered out table of contents in that full video description as well, so you can click and watch whatever part of this video you want to watch or rewatch. And there's also kind of a chaptered out table of contents if you just scroll along the timeline of the video. That's always there. And I just want to thank everyone who's been sharing, subscribing, liking, and helping spread the word about this channel. It makes a big difference. All right, so I was going with a big pack with my family. I've got, you know, my wife, I don't want her to carry a whole bunch of weight and have a lousy time. We're going up with a good friend of mine, Steve Myers, I do a lot of kite surfing with. He's out on the beach with our family all the time when we're kite surfing. He hadn't been to Olympic National Park. My cousin Don Bevan had told me about this spot he loved to take his kids when they were small, or his daughter when she was really small. The Ozette Triangle. It's a 3-mile hike in through old growth in the northwestern corner of Olympic National Park, not far below Victoria Island, British Columbia. So we made the schlep up there, a 5.5-hour van drive with the kiddos. And I had just backpacks and sleeping pads in my kids' packs. I had Stacy loaded pretty light in her pack. So I was carrying a lot of weight, and I really needed to pare down on what photo gear I was going to take. And I just have to say, you know, just quickly, one of the things I brought was a GoPro just to do a little bit of filming. And you can see in this footage, my kiddos did the whole 3.5 miles, no complaints, no asking to have someone else carry their packs. We stopped for a snack. We stopped to put extra clothes on as we got closer to the coast and got a little bit colder. But they carried their packs all 6 miles, and I could just not have been prouder. All right, so I said, you know, just for video, for capturing family video and those kinds of moments out hiking through the woods, the GoPro Hero 9, I love this camera. Its audio is amazing.
Slow down, slow down.
Yeah. You having fun?
Would you like to carry all of our packs?
Yeah, right? No, are you
that's
sure?
me.
And its video quality is just stunning. I feel like GoPro really hit it out of the park with this one. Plus it has a little forward-facing camera, so screen, so you can actually see yourself to frame yourself up if you're vlogging with it. It's pretty rad. I had to choose between the Z6 II and the Z7 II or the Z50 to take with me. I really wanted image quality, so I thought, you know, I'll take the Z7 II. It was kind of down between the Z6 II and Z7 II. The Z6 II is all rigged up to film these kinds of things with you, and I would have had to pull it out of the small rig cage and disconnect all the wiring and everything. To be honest, I was just pressed for time, so that's why I took the Z7 II. I probably would have taken the 6 II if they were just sitting side by side in the box, since it's a little better in low light, and I didn't know that I needed really high resolution, or I could use panoramas in the landscape to create that high resolution if I need to. So the Z7 II, my adored little 24-70 f4, so sharp, so small, so well balanced on this camera. The bigger question was what for a long lens, you know, and I went round and round with, well, do I want to just take a 300 for wildlife, my 300 PF, which is about the same weight as my 70-200. Do I want to take the 70-200? I wound up just bringing these two lenses, the 24-70 and the 70-200. I figured the 70-200 could, to a certain extent, do some wildlife photography for me, but it could also get those beautiful portraits and shallow depth of field scenes with my family and Steve and just the surroundings, and, you know, get those kinds of human interest images. And with the Z7 II, it gives me a little more croppability. So maybe if I'm not getting as tight in on wildlife as I'd like, I can crop from that big 46 megapixel image. Camera support, I went with my lightweight tripod setup, the Leo Photo 284 CEX with the built-in leveling adapter and the Acrotech panorama head that I love with the lever clamp. And of course my Kirk LRP3 panning, the nodal rail, so I could do panoramas and get the camera balanced over this head. And I put all of that into this old stuff sack that I have from Outdoor Research, along with Leo Photo TFS spikes. These are these wonderful plastic tipped, long, really high quality stainless steel spikes where you can just pull the tip off, and all of a sudden you got a spike for sticking it into the sand in the beach for beach shooting, since we're going to be on the beach, or you thread it back on and it doesn't sink in and it doesn't mar floors. I put all that into this little ultra lightweight OR stuff sack, which I've had for like 20 years. I can't give you a link to that. I don't even know if they make it anymore. But it's nice because it's got little sort of daisy chain connection that you can strap onto the side of your backpack, and it just protects the tripod a little bit, having it in that bag. I put the LRP3 loose in my kit. I only took one spare battery, so one battery in my Z7 II, one spare battery. I was going to be out there for 2 days, and I brought along my little Anker 10,000 milliamp power delivery battery. It puts out like 20 amps or something like that, so it's fine to run the camera off this doing night work. It's the equivalent of about 2.5 more batteries. You can run the camera off it. You can charge the battery when you're not using it by just plugging the camera into this with the battery in it. So I brought that and a USB-C cord. So that's the equivalent of about 3 spare batteries without quite as much weight as 3 spare batteries. Again, I brought the Hero 9. For carrying the camera, I brought my little f-stop Naveen camera holster, which this way is set up perfectly for the 24-70, and I have little clip-in Guardian straps from f-stop that just clip into the harness of my backpack, so I could wear it on my chest while we were hiking and get shots when we're running around. But the nice thing about the Naveen is it expands. There's this little hook system where if you just kind of pinch it, it takes a little bit of work to do, but you pinch it and pull it apart. There's one. The nice thing is it doesn't happen accidentally, but you do have to kind of work at it a little bit to expand it. It takes a little pinch of the ballistic nylon and a twist, and then it expands, and it'll hold my camera with the 70-200 in it just as well as it does the 24-70 enclosed and hang on my chest. So that's a really nice thing. Doesn't weigh much, a little bit of padding to protect it, but it's just a great, great holster system. And I brought my Luma Labs QD strap to just be able to carry the camera on my side when I didn't have my backpack on. For filters, I went back and forth. You know, the things that came really close to making the cut where was my 14 to 24 2.8. I love this lens, but it plus the larger filters to work with it, it was just a little more weight than I wanted backpacking. You know, you got to bring the hood if I wanted to do long exposures or polarize the surface of the water or anything like that with it. So I just decided if I was going to do work that required a wider angle, it would just have to be panorama. I did shoot a panorama. You'll see it when I show the photos that I go through and to kind of talk about my process. I actually used the 70 to 200 to shoot the panorama. You'll see why. But for filters, I brought my usual sort of geared up set. I have a little sandwich set right here between magnetic front and back caps of 6-stop and 10-stop neutral density filters. In addition, I have a neutral night filter and a 3-stop neutral density filter back here, just so that they're set and ready to go. And a UV filter in case I got into really rough conditions with blowing sand or salt water. And then ready to go on my 24 to 70, I have a front magnetic cap with the polarizing filter. So I just pull my UV filter that lives there on my 24 to 70 and thread this magnetic 82 to 72 adapter on, and it has a cap on it, and there's my circular polarizer ready to go. Magnetized on there. If I want to switch, this is the beauty of the Kase system, and this is why I just adore it. You know, you've got the magnetic cap there, and if I want to switch filters out, it's as easy as pull out my stack cap set, peel off a 10-stop filter like that, and switch it, just magnet it right onto that magnetic 72 to 82 adapter ring. If I want to put the cap on it, I can put the other filter back in my stack, close that stack cap kit, stick that either in my pocket or in my filter case, like so, and now all of a sudden I have a 10-stop filter on there. I want to put the cap on it, nice, rock solid connection with that magnetic cap, pull it off, no filter at all. Just super, super simple. And with the polarizing filter, it doesn't need to be thick. You can just spin it because it just spins in front of the lens. You don't have to have those two rings that you normally have with the polarizer to enable it to spin while the other ring threads into your filter thread. It's just magnetized, so you can have this ultra thin piece of glass. Let's see, where's my, I took it out, but my circular polarizer is right here against that back cap. It's so ludicrously thin. There's really almost no chance of vignetting in comparison to filters that have threads. It just is so small. You know, people have been asking me a lot, you know, why Kase? You've been testing all these other filters, Nisi and Kase and Lee's new stuff. You know, I think all the filters, Hoya, Nisi, Kase, Lee's new stuff, they're all really, really high optical quality. They all give me excellent neutral results with the neutral density, really good polarizing, no noticeable image degradation when I'm shooting through any of those or the UV. The biggest difference for me is the simplicity of use and thin, innovative nature of these filters. It's just a piece of cake to work with, and I love it. And you know, I'm fortunate enough, I really like having the 82mm system for these ultra light situations. You know, again, the other thing I have in my filter case here is a 77 to 82mm adapter. So if I want to use the system on my 77mm, 70 to 200, it's as easy as threading that guy on. You know, the system that I use when weight isn't an issue is the 112mm filters. And the joy of just being able to take that big Nikon 112mm HB97 hood, keep a 112mm Kase magnetic ring on it, and just slip one of these big, no worries about vignetting with this guy, filter in and lock it into that and switch and swap and stack without fearing of vignetting. And that filter hood fits on the 70 to 200 as well as the 14 to 24, as well as the 14 to 30, as well as the 24 to 72.8, as well as the 51.2 lens. It's really clear that Nikon has kind of decided that this 112mm hood is something that they're going to be working with their premium lenses going forward. So people ask me, you know, which system should I buy? And I get people wanting 77 millimeter. My biggest lens is 77 millimeter. Well, I think, you know, the smallest size you should invest in really high quality filters, to my mind, is 82. Because if you buy 77 or you buy 72 because your current biggest lens is a 72 or a 77, and then you start doing more and more photography and you wind up really wanting that brand new lens that your brand has come out with, and guess what? It's an 82 millimeter filter thread. And now all of your 72s and 77s, they have to go up for auction on eBay or put up on some other website or given to a friend so that you can buy a new set that's big enough for your new lens. The nice thing about adapting up to 82 millimeters is that you're future-proofed for that next lens purchase, and you have less likelihood of vignetting when you're putting a bigger filter on a smaller lens. You just simply get the magnetic adapters like this 77 to 82. You know, if you're working with the big 112 millimeter filters, which are my favorite, and I think that if you're a Nikon Z person, you should really strongly consider going with this big 112 standard and buying an HB97 hood. Again, I have links to all this stuff. You know, hudsonhenry.com/case for the filter stuff, ATS links for all the other stuff, but everything that I'm talking about with filters is at my hudsonhenry.com/case page. So, you know, these filters with the 112, they're just a cakewalk to use, and then if you get a big lens from like Zeiss that's bigger than 82, or Nikon's 500 PF, or some future big lens coming from Nikon, it's easy to slap a polarizer on there, or a UV filter to protect it, because you can just adapt it to this. You know, Kase is making an 82, a 77, 82, and 95 to 112 adapter, magnetic adapters. So I can just slap a 95 to 112 magnetic adapter on my 500 PF big bird lens, and all of a sudden I can polarize, or I can put a UV filter on it to work in rough conditions. It's just a piece of cake. They're so easy to use. So to me, the reason for Kase is really truly that, you know, that thin, innovative nature of the filters, how well the magnetic system works, and how easy it is to use. I think all of the top filter brands are producing amazing glass. It's kind of like how all the digital camera brands are producing amazing cameras and amazing new lenses for those cameras. It's a real revolution optically right now for photographers. The biggest thing is which one works best for you and which one is easiest to use and lets you focus more on the creative aspect of photography, you know, the composition, the light, you know, how are you going to expose this image, and worry less about trying to thread filters together or getting stuck threads, or, you know, all the complexities that work with other. It just makes my life one step simpler, so I love it. All right, so that having been talked about, let's jump in and let's actually dive in and look through a few of my images from Olympic National Park. I'm going to jump back on the computer, talk you through some of the things that went through my head and how I used this limited set of tools that I took with me on the trip. All right, so here I am in Lightroom, and I've got a group of images. I'm just going to jump into the loop view, and I'm going to shut down all the tabs in my Lightroom here, so they get a nice big view. And you can see exposure data right here. So I'm shooting with the Z7 II, and you can see exposure data. My file numbers are all kind of wonky as it renamed. Somehow they were not in the right sort order, so don't worry about why they're kind of all over the place. They're in their numeric order, or they're actually in sort of the as shot order. And I got, you know, exposure data, so all that's right there if you want to have a look. So, you know, I was mainly shooting with my Nikon Z7 II and the 24-70 f4. That's the perfect kind of knock-around lens. I had that in that f-stop Naveen front holster as we're backpacking in. And I'm just, you know, again, blown away. My kiddos hiked in Pike here, Pepper May, my wife Stacy, my good friend Steve, who I spend a lot of time kite surfing with. The kiddos just rocked it, 3 miles in, 3 miles out, and it was so fun to take pictures of them. We only took really 2 breaks on the trail on the way in, 1 break on the way out, both at this big fallen down tree whose root ball created kind of a fun little climbing gym. And, you know, we got out to the coast, beautiful evening, clear skies. I knew the stars were going to be nice. We found this awesome campsite right on the edge of the woods. It's sort of that interface between all the driftwood and the forest, and perfect spot to set up camp. People had already built kind of tables out of wood that they found out on the beach, and it was just a wonderful spot. There's Steve and Pike hanging out. Pike's got his nighttime little ice shield up. And then we went out and did some playing around in the low tide. There were a bunch of tide pools at low tide that evening. So we went out and went looking through tide pools. And I was really glad that I brought my 70 to 200 2.8, because it just made for such nice shots of the family out there, you know, and just kind of opening up the aperture. But here's f3.2. I think I was photographing some birds, some herons that were flying around, and so I was down at I was in shutter priority at 1,000th of a second in case the birds flew. And then I spun around and I saw that my aperture was pretty wide open base ISO, and I was just photographing Stacy and the kids as they went through tide pools. I just love the way that 70 to 200, especially wide open at f2.8, it just has such a beautiful image. And again, you know, after shooting with the Canon for a little while, it's nice to come back. You guys could check it out. Last week I did the R5, which is an amazing, amazing camera. I did a kind of a review of that camera, really enjoying it. But coming back to shooting the Z7 II for a while, that Nikon color science and just the image quality and dynamic range, it just made me happy to have my Z camera back in my hand. There's Pepper. There were some seals out there. This is the one time where I wished I had my 500 PF or even my 300 or a crop sensor camera, but you know, this is a crop in a bit using the AF tracking feature. You can see the harbor seals laying out there on the rocks. That was about as close as I could get. I stalked up on a heron that was way out there. I would have had to get really wet to get any closer, and I actually had to do a fair bit of stalking to get this close, but heron out there hunting amongst the rocks at low tide. And then we had just, you know, a gorgeous kind of sunset setup. I saw the family here, and I'm like, hang on, and shot this with my 24 to 70. Just put the sun behind Stacy, let it blow out a little bit around the edges. I love that rim light you get when you put the sun right behind your subject. It just does amazing things, that little glowing electric outline that you get. And then I was out kind of playing around in the tide pools at sunset. The sun went behind these clouds, but it was still really bright sky, really dark foreground. So I captured this as one frame on the meter, one frame 3 stops underexposed, just blended those in HDR and Lightroom, adjusted it a little bit. It let me get such nice shadow detail, you know, without getting a whole bunch of noise pulling the shadows so far, and still, you know, maintain that highlight without blowing the sun out like a blob. You can see it shaped through the clouds. As it got darker, I did another HDR shot here just to preserve that shape. I mean, it's that crazy kind of apocalypse now sort of look to the sun through just blasting through that cloud. You can see all the birds in the sky coming off the sea stacks. And there was a lot of kelp out there, which led to a lot of life in this particular bay up in the Ozette Triangle. You can see the kelp beds out here, and I love the way they're catching the light. And then I noticed that Steve was sitting with Pike watching the sunset, so I flipped around, ran back into camp. You can see I'm shooting this with the 200 millimeter to get, you know, as far in on that rock in the sunset as I can. And then I ran back into the back of the camp and racked back to 90 millimeters and shot this shot of Steve and Pike. Handheld, I told them to be still, and I shot the same thing, HDR. All 3 of these are one shot on the meter, one shot 3 stops underexposed. I set that up with the function 2 button on my Z7 II, so that I just tap that button and I roll the back wheel 1 click to say 2 frames to the minus side, and I have the front wheel to set to 3 stops under. It's just sitting there usually, and then put it in high-speed capture, and just goes, I hold the trigger down, bap bap, just fires 2 frames. I just hold really still, and that did just fine, you know, if you're careful hand holding. Then I just liked the scene so much, I stayed at that 99 millimeters with the 70 to 200 and fired off I think this is a 12 frame panorama. If I cycle through my information here, it's about 175 megapixels, I think, 20,500 pixels by 8343. Plenty of resolution in here. If I click, yeah, there's the beauty of a big pano. You get unlimited printability. And then as the sun went down, I found that Steve and Pike were hanging out there, and I just got a little bit different view. I was sort of only viewing this as a silhouette. This is a single frame, but here's where those Sony sensors that we have in the top Nikons and the Sony cameras, they just have that dynamic range like nothing else. You know, this looked like a silhouette in the viewfinder, looked like a silhouette when I got the image into Lightroom, and then I pulled the shadows, and all of the highlights and all the shadows are there in a single frame. And then I just, you know, I've been more and more, as I get older, I love to take photos of skies. And sometimes, you know, I'll put those into photo kits for the on one faithful when I do photo kits, or I'll, you know, use them as potential sky replacements. I don't do a lot of sky replacements, but I sometimes put together packs for people who do. And sometimes I just love the sky. I love that gradient when it goes from that orange to blue. There's a little vignetting I could probably work on here. This is probably pretty close to wide open with the 70 to 200. I guess I could turn exposure data back on here. And then jumping back to the 24 to 70, I ran around out in the post-sunset light in the low tide and found this just crazy kind of ocean bottom mud ripples that reminded me of sand dunes and the green kelp. And you know, I didn't ever work into a composition that I loved, but you know, this is no portfolio shot by any stretch of the imagination, but it gives you a feel for what it was to be out there that night. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. And then I kind of went out to the edge of, you know, I waded into to some water with my feet, got out to where it was a little bit smoother, more reflective. I had that Kase polarizer. I cranked it to just make sure I had the reflections maximized on the surface of the water. And I actually spent a long time kind of trying to find this balance with the pattern of all these little rocks at low tide coming up in the shallows. It was a chaotic mess, and it actually, I like this one. I love the way the sky is reflecting down below. As it got a little darker and I went back up to camp, I turned back and saw this frame up with the headland to the north and all those sea stacks kind of through the mist, and took one last shot of the stacks and everything. And then here's what I promised. I promised I'd talk about this Big Dipper scene from our camp. You know, we had a bay that stretched around to the south, curved around out to sea, and there were big trees to the south of me, so I couldn't really do anything with the Milky Way without doing quite a hike at night and leaving my family behind in the campsite, and this is more of a family trip. So I kind of looked at the situation, and I saw the Big Dipper coming out in the blue hour, and I thought, well, let's do a portrait of the Big Dipper. That would be kind of fun over the sea stacks in camp. And so again, you know, I was going light, backpacking with the family, prioritizing keeping my kiddos and my wife having light packs and not carrying a whole bunch of gear. So I didn't have my star tracker, which is my preferred way to shoot nice, clean pictures of the stars of the Milky Way. So what I did is I did a really long exposure. Here you can see I did 240 seconds, f4, ISO 640, that's a pretty good ISO. With the Z7 II. I prefer to stay 1600 and under, sometimes out to 3200 with the Z7 II. It just starts to get so noisy after that. That was just to get shadow detail here in the foreground so that I could pull it out in post and get that last bit of color. You know, it was very, very dark. You can see that up in the space, we've got star trails forming at that long a shutter speed at 37 millimeters. And then I grabbed my PhotoPills app on my phone and I pulled up the MPF rule for accurate pinpoint stars, and it told me that the composition I liked of the North Star, or not the North Star, of the Big Dipper. Big Dipper points to the North Star somewhere up around here, the leading edge of it, was about 3 seconds to get pinpoint stars, and I wanted nice sharp pinpoint stars. So I set up an exposure, 1600 again, that's where I like the noise out of the Z7 II. f4 wide open with the lens that I had. I do wish I'd had my 21.8 or my 14 to 24, but again, wait. And I set it for 3 seconds and I took 16 frames. I took a dark slide at the same exposure, so I left the lens cap on and shot one 3-second frame, f4 1600. Then I set the interval limiter to every 4 seconds to take a shot like this for 16 frames. Then I took one more dark slide at the end, and then I fed those into a piece of software called Sequitur, to do star stacking, to average all the noise out of those images in the shadows. Because right now, if I took this image into develop, this single frame from this, and I tried pulling exposure up, well, you see it gets noisy really quick as I pull that blue hour image up. It's pretty much unusable when I bring the exposure up. But if I averaged all of those images, here's the average result. It puts out a TIFF from Sequitur, which is the PC software. I don't know why it says 48 seconds. It's an average of all those 3-second frames. Maybe it puts them all together and calls it that, the output. It's the equivalent of 48 seconds. But at any rate, that's what it puts out. And you can see that you can pull the exposure and shadows and everything up on that, and you don't get that noise. It averages that noise out. So 16 frames like this became something I could pull the shadows out to this. And then I just took that foreground image that I had here and overlaid this image of the stars, and just honestly with a soft brush in Photoshop, I just brushed the two together. And blended it at that colorful part of the horizon. I had to go in with the patch tool and get rid of a few little streaking bits of stars that the Earth's rotation were creating star trails just down here in the clouds. It was real easy. There were maybe 7 or 8 of them I just got rid of in Photoshop with some little detail edging tools. And then I edited that a little bit more, that resultant image here in Lightroom, took it into OM1, and did some finish editing to kind of just finish it up. And I wound up with a really nice frame that I love of the Big Dipper up above our beach. So, you know, good enough. It was a little hazy out there. It's not maybe as sharp as I would love because of the haze and the mist that was happening down below, but still fun image of that evening that reminds me of the stars that night that we were able to see. The next morning, we climbed up on one of the little bluffs on the headland just to get a view out. Smoke had really rolled in that morning. We were literally standing around our camp, and all of a sudden, puff, this warm wind came in just filled with smoke, and it smelled all of a sudden like a forest fire. We went from clean air 1 minute, and literally in the middle of conversation, we all went, wow, it got like 10 degrees warmer and smoky. The air pushed in from the east, and so we decided to pack up camp, head out, and so we all hiked out. Kids, again, were just champs, and scurried up to Hurricane Ridge, which is up in the mountains at above 5,000 feet. It gets you a view of the Olympic range. That's Mount Olympus and the Blue Glacier back there behind Stacy and the kids, and you get up to this beautiful high alpine meadows, and we were just a little bit above the smoke, enough that you could kind of see it down below in the valleys, how bad it was. We're still in it a bit, but up there you kind of got above it a little bit. Gives you an idea of just how much wildfire smoke is coming into the west. I can tell I need to clean the Z7 II's sensor. You know, this is one thing, when you stop down, the sensor dust really comes popping out. You know, if I wanted to get rid of that in Lightroom, it's as easy as just opening up my sensor dust removal tool and zapping each one of those, and it'll get rid of them. But the real key is to blow out your sensor with a rocket blower, and then if you need to, wet clean that sensor. I have a whole kit on cleaning your sensor. Maybe I will link that in this video's description if you click on the video's title or show more. But you know, then we were driving home along the Hood Canal. You can see how smoky it is, but also how beautiful and clear that water is. Lots and lots of oysters and clams along here, and you know, it's even in the smoke, that water was so warm with all the heat waves we've had. It just felt wonderful to get in the water for a little bit on our way home. So great trip, an awesome couple of days up in the Olympics, and just some examples of, you know, when I go light, when I don't take a whole lot of gear with me, how I think about using the tools that I have to get the best possible images, and shooting for the edit and then editing for the images that you get. All right, so I hope that's helpful, kind of looking through, you know, my lens as I'm having to sort down to just the essential gear for a lighter weight trip, how I carry it, and how I approach different scenes with using a more limited gear set. Maybe you have to use a panorama to get a wider angle or higher resolution Maybe you don't have the star tracker, so you think about some other ways of getting pinpoint stars. You know, I can see a couple follow-up questions like with HDR capture. You know, yes, I find that with the sensors in the last number of cameras I've had, these great Sony built sensors that Nikon's using, that one shot on the meter, one 3 stops underexposed, is able to capture just about all of the tonal information that I need in really strongly backlit, aka sunset type scenes. You know, you can experiment on your own with that, but I find that the best results I'm getting are one shot on the meter, one shot 3 stops underexposed, blending those into an HDR image and naturally processing them. For the stacking, it's not something I've done a ton of, but you know, I'm a bigger fan of using a star tracker if I can and just have the camera move with the stars and do really long exposures at low ISO. It's easier for me personally, but I was happy with the images that I got. And again, I just pulled up photo pills on my phone. I went to their MPF rule. I made the setting accurate. I told it the focal length I was shooting at and the aperture f4 that I had, and it spit out 3 seconds, you know, 3 point something seconds. So I decided I wanted nice sharp pinpoint stars. 3 seconds is my limit. I thought to myself, you know, about the highest I like the noise out of this camera if I can is 1600 ISO. Let's practice with that. And sure enough, it worked. I shot 16 frames. And the thing that you're going to need for that is one dark slide at either end. So you figure out your exposure, put the cap on, shoot one shot with the cap on it. Then run your intervalometer. If you're going to be shooting 3 seconds, set your intervalometer to take an image every 4 seconds. Turn off your long exposure noise reduction. That stacking software is going to do that for you. And you just have it shoot 16 frames, 4 seconds apart, 3 seconds each exposure. It's going to be done when it's done. Then take one more shot, a dark slide with the lens cap on, and you can feed those into your processing software of choice. I'm going to really recommend those of you on the Mac use Starry Landscape Stacker. For those of you on the PC, the Sequitur is a really nice free piece of software. And I'll be talking more about that in the Milky Way course that's about to come out. Have faith in me, it's about to be out there. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. I hope some of you were able to get out on some adventures. I know we're having a little resurgence of the whole health crisis, but you know, hopefully those of us who are vaccinated are getting out there. If you watched it to the end of this video, I want to make sure that I let some of you know I just put out vaccination guidelines for my workshops, for my national park workshops that are coming out this fall. And we're requiring people to be vaccinated, and we're requiring people to mask if they're going to ride together in vehicles when they're not part of the same family or my vehicle, the vehicles that I'm running, and indoors in situations where we can't socially distance. So we're going to follow those guidelines. And I had a few openings as a result of announcing those, but it's just really critical to me that I'm keeping everyone involved in my workshop safe. And so we're going to roll with those. And there are a couple of openings. If you guys go and look at the workshop pages, hudsonhenry.com/workshops, you'll find that there's one opening right now in the Tetons, and there's 2 in Moab. So jump on those fast if you're interested. The link again, hudsonhenry.com/workshops. I hope to see everybody in the office hours, Tuesday, 10 a.m. We're going to talk about workshops. hudsonhenry.com/office hours. Free meeting, sign up, leave your question when you sign up. It'll be fun chatting and seeing everybody's faces. All right, everyone. So take care, be safe, be creative, and we'll see you next week.